Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博仁。US President Donald Trump has announced that an agreement has been reached with China over TikTok, claiming that he'll have a call with China's president this Friday to seal the deal. But China's foreign affairs spokesperson Lin Jian said yesterday that he had no information about such a phone call. On top of that, Western media is claiming US interests will own up to 80% of the company, leaving just 20% to ByteDance, a much higher percentage than most pundits thought possible. So what is going on? Is there really a deal, or has Trump just jumped the gun again? Today I'll ask my special guest, Adjunct Professor Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology and a Senior Fellow at Beijing's Taihe Institute. Let's go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. US President Donald Trump has extended his 90-day deadline for the sale of popular social media app TikTok for the third time, stopping the platform from going dark in the United States today. But this time he reckons he's finally struck a deal with China. As usual, he made the announcement on social media saying, "The big trade meeting in Europe between the United States of America and China has gone very well. It will be concluding shortly. A deal was also reached on a certain company that young people in our country very much wanted to save. They will be very happy. I'll be speaking to President Xi on Friday. The relationship remains a very strong one." Now, of course, he's referring to trade talks being held between China and the US in Madrid, Spain, which this time have appeared to focus heavily on the TikTok issue. Western media is already claiming that the US will own around 80%, with ByteDance retaining just 20%, and that the app's very successful algorithm will be licensed to the US, although this deal will only affect the app in the United States, in a way becoming a separate standalone version. The US side has frequently claimed the app created and owned by Chinese company ByteDance is a national security threat and that it can only remain operating in the United States if a majority share is sold to US interests. For more clarity, I want to bring in my special guest, Professor Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology. Professor, thanks for coming on today. Firstly, has a deal, in fact, been inked, or is Trump just jumping the gun again?
Well, it's good to be with you again, Andy. It's been a little while. There is a very different style of communications about the progress of discussions, clearly between the United States and China. The US tends to have a proclivity to jump the gun a little bit, or at least introduce a little bit more hyperbole in terms of the contents of discussions. It almost comes across as a hard sell, whereas the Chinese side have historically taken a more restrained approach to describing where discussions are at. And I guess this really stems from the fact that the Chinese experience is that in the end, talk is cheap. And the real issue is always going to be about making sure that agreements are landed and carried through. Having said that, there are plenty of reports, and we see this also from comments from the Chinese side, that the discussions in Madrid did go into the question of TikTok in some detail, and that a framework agreement had been reached which goes to the longer-term future of TikTok as an app in the North American market. Now, a framework agreement, I think, is a clear indication that the pivotal make or break issues, the deal makers or breakers, so to speak, have been tackled, and that a common position has been agreed between the parties. Now, that should, in theory, lay the groundwork then for the implementation of this high-level agreement or consensus through proper documentation, ultimately to a point where the high-level consensus that's been reached at the moment actually translates into a concrete outcome. So is there a deal? Well, perhaps we could say that there is a deal with a small d, but right now we're a little bit away from there being a deal with a capital D.
Now, the $1 million question, or the $1 billion question perhaps, that a lot of people are asking is, if a deal really does go ahead, and it will certainly at some point, what do you think China might ask for in return?
The representatives of China at the Madrid talks actually spoke about the ByteDance, or more specifically, the TikTok discussions, in the context of discussions about reducing barriers to investment. And I would expect that part of the broader agreements that are being worked on is reducing barriers to Chinese investments in North America, and possibly also looking at ways in which American investments can continue to come into China. In recent times, as I'm sure you and your viewers know, the prospects for Chinese companies investing in America have become increasingly difficult, in large part due to the difficult political circumstances that have evolved over the course of the last so many years. So much so that whenever the talk of China popping up in mainstream discussions in the United States, we get huge reactions from the political classes and others seeking to show somebody who's tougher on China than somebody else. We've seen concerns around Chinese ownership of land and rental, the rights to rent properties. Recently, Texas has passed laws prohibiting that. We, of course, have seen controversy around Chinese investments in factories for water-related initiatives, and there has been for a while now a long-standing public discussion in America about whether or not there should be nationwide bans of Chinese ownership of American farmland, even though that level of ownership is somewhere less than half of 1%. So it has been a difficult relationship from an investment point of view, and I would hope, given the comments made by the Chinese side in particular, which does tend to be a little bit more focused on the detail and the substance than the commentary from the American counterparts, that discussions are going to try to address the barriers that have emerged in recent times to Chinese investment in America. This is actually very important for America. And the reason it's important for America, Andy, is because China is a surplus trading country. It accumulates substantial amounts of US dollars, and those US dollars need to be recycled back into the American system in one shape or another for them to maintain relevance from a value point of view. So if America makes it difficult for Chinese entities to recycle those dollars back into the American system, that's actually of long-term damaging consequence for the American economy.
Okay, now let's move back a bit to technology. We constantly hear from the West that China just can't innovate, that China copies and steals from the West and others. So why is it that the US side is so desperate to use China's algorithms?
Well, clearly, TikTok has been very successful globally, and it has been successful in part because its algorithm, the way it promotes particular pieces of work, is quite different from the algorithms that have dominated mainstream American social media. So I think that there has been a desire to not just access this kind of technology, but hopefully from an American point of view, take some control over it, particularly in terms of the domestic market. Clearly, ByteDance, through its TikTok app, has demonstrated that Chinese technology companies are more than capable of their own innovations and creating services and products that are able to not only achieve success in China itself, but to become very popular elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, and as we all know, kind of related to that, China operates what's become known as the Great Firewall, where the internet here is basically protected from the outside, which has allowed a Chinese internet ecosystem to flourish. Now, many in the West claim that that's a bad thing, that China should give Western media companies like Facebook and YouTube free rein here. So why then is the US side now saying that letting Chinese apps like TikTok operate freely there is a national security risk? Isn't that a bit hypocritical?
Well, the challenge for North America and the Americans generally speaking is that historically it has dominated technology, and as a result of that, it's been in their interest to have the rest of the world open its markets to American technology. That's been incredibly successful right across the globe for some of the platforms you've mentioned, including into Europe, where European localized capabilities, things that you could say are in effect like for like, or near enough like for like alternatives to well-known American platforms and apps, have simply faded over the last 20 years in the face of the expansion of American big technology. China took a very different path over 20 years ago, where it saw that it was in its own national interest to ensure that it had a secure information environment. Now, in doing that, it didn't actually ban specific companies at all. What it did do, though, was that it insisted that technology companies, particularly those dealing with large amounts of data, whether it's corporate data or the data of individuals in society, that those companies had to comply with Chinese laws. Companies that are not in China today are companies that have chosen to not comply with Chinese laws and therefore are not able to legally operate in China. The issue from an American point of view in terms of the questions of data security does have a different dimension, though, Andy, and it goes to the fact that in this case with TikTok, the data storage has long been addressed. It has been stored in America on American infrastructure, and from a purely technical point of view, the questions of data security from a national point of view have long been resolved. This has never been an issue of national data security, in my view. It has largely been a question of geopolitics.
Definitely a lot to think about, and I'll be looking forward to Friday to see if a deal has actually been reached. Professor Warwick Powell, thank you so much for your time today.
Great to be with you.
And on that note, that will be all for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think China should sell a majority share of TikTok to the US? And is it hypocritical for the US side to now claim TikTok is a national security risk? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.